Now, a really interesting experimental study was just published by researchers from the University of Iowa, led by John Wemme, and it was published on February 3rd in Nature Neuroscience. And what this experiment looked at is the effects of fear and how it can be triggered in people. Now, our traditional understanding of fear is that it's all first set off by the amygdala, which is a small region in our brain. It basically directs attention, and it's not really where fear happens in our brain, but it's kind of where it kicks off. So much so that if someone has damage to their amygdala, they essentially don't feel any fear. Using the example of one woman, researchers subjected her to a lot of stuff. They'd show her spiders, snakes, stuff like that. They went as far as having her being mugged at knife point, and she still would not feel fear. They called her the woman without fear. However, Dr. Wemme, along with his colleagues, found an intervention that managed to actually give her some fear. This sounds a bit cruel, unethical. You're just trying to scare people. But as you'll see, we actually learned quite a bit about fear through this experiment. And of course, she consented to it. They aren't just like tormenting this poor woman for fun. So what they did is they had her take a seat, and she, along with other people who have this disorder in their amygdala, or this inactive amygdala, I should say, and they were, I'm not even sure how to phrase this properly, they were gassed. They were given a gas mask, and they were given a concentration of about, I believe, 35% CO2. And I don't know if anyone else has experienced that, hopefully not, but it creates this feeling of being suffocated. The typical response for people is to hurriedly claw at the mask and try and pull it off. And what they found is this woman, along with other people who had deficiencies in their amygdala, they suffered tremendous fear, and they actually had panic attacks. They were freaking out, basically. And this is a really interesting finding because this shows that even without a functioning amygdala, there is still a fear response that can be triggered. The only difference is this is a fear response coming from an internal status of not being able to breathe, whereas all the other ones were external threats of spiders or armed robbers. Also interesting is that they performed the exact same experiment on people with fully functional amygdalas, and they found that same response, that sort of panic attack and intense fear, it only happened in about 3 out of 12, whereas it happened with every single person with the malfunctioning amygdala. And they sort of theorized that when they're sort of strapping people in and putting the mask on the people with the functioning amygdalas, they get a little afraid. They sort of have this fear response, and that kind of prepares them for what's about to happen. Whereas the people who don't have that fear response, even if they know what's going to happen, that sudden change in their physiology catches their brain off guard, and they have an even more intense panic attack. Now you might be wondering, what does this really do? I mean, we already knew a malfunction amygdala is bad. Fear is actually very helpful and adaptive. But it also goes to show that there might be treatments we could develop for people who suffer from panic attacks. Perhaps making sure their amygdala is in working order so they can better respond to the beginning of symptoms or possible triggers for symptoms rather than waiting for the actual attack to happen. And then, I mean, if you're not braced for the attack, it'll hit you even harder, and the consequences will be more dire. So, one thing you can take away is that there are 2 types of fear. I hope that isn't too scary to find out. External, internal. And I hope you found it interesting. Thanks.